Welcome to Trinity Place in Geneva, New York. My name is Cameron Miller. So, this is not a really good morning to preach Jesus. I mean, there's 2.2 million cases of the coronavirus in the United States and about 120,000 deaths so far. And June is busting out all over when it comes to the pandemic. Meanwhile, in the midst of suffering through the loneliness of social isolation, the blinders of our white privilege have been ripped off, pulling our eyelids with them. For many of us, we have been hanging out at our homes, doing okay, more or less, while 40 million people lost their jobs, and the realities of unequal treatment under the law brought us face to face with the reality that apparently black lives have not mattered. Now, not to put too fine a point on our predicament, the streets are filled with thousands and thousands and thousands of people, put them all together, millions of people who are half our age and younger, and it has become painfully clear for anybody with eyes to see that there is a movement afoot to do away with our white privilege and generational power. And so the muscling aside of the baby boomer generation and the older generations has begun in earnest. We can see with our own eyes a far more multiracial, multi-ethnic generation who is making its will known. And that is at the same time that us oldsters are quivering at home in hiding from the COVID-19 virus that has put targets on our backs. Now, that's not really an unfair description of our current moment, is it? At least not for those of us who are white, over 60, and own our own homes. So, with that as a backdrop, rather than this nice dove of peace, I'm supposed to preach about Jesus? Come on. That's like passing out there and trying to sell copies of the Communist Manifesto in the state dining room of the Titanic. I mean, here we are, finally blessed with weather we can enjoy for the summer and the beauty of the natural world all around us. And we have Jeremiah and Matthew, which are like pizza cheese hanging off our lips, and nobody wants to tell us that it's there. Preaching Jesus is like that first moment at the end of a terrific lightning storm when the air smells clean, but you're not sure whether it's safe to go outside to see if everything is still intact. I'm not sure that now, this moment, is the moment to be talking about daughters tearing their mothers limb from limb, or sons ganging up on their fathers, and all manner of violence that Jesus says is coming our way because of him. Oh, happy Father's Day, by the way. If the people I was preaching to right now were mostly 20s, 30s, and 40-year-olds who would have been keeping the streets busy lately, then this hard-act Jesus would fit right in, and I could let loose and holler. Now, if the people I was preaching to were mostly black, brown, and other, then Jesus, being a black and brown man, put to death by state power, why, that would pretty much preach itself. Enough said. But the two prophets talking to us today are not really the company we want to be keeping in a pandemic when social change is in the forecast. Now, don't get me wrong, the Jeremiah and Jesus we heard today are the reason I'm a priest. They've been speaking the truth as I understand it all my life and have been rattling my privilege just as long too. But these days, being older when the world is growing younger, and being relatively well off when the economy is in free fall, I'm kind of feeling my inner Nicodemus. And I'm hearing the whispers of old British colonial ancestors that I've been trying to stuff in the closet for years. I look at those readings today and I just sigh. I just heave a big sigh. And it's not really that I have very many sacred cows left at all. Or whatever's left in there, Jesus is riding rodeo on. The first thing Jesus attacks is family values. He goes right for the jugular of first century Judean society that was organized around a rigidly stratified family structure. Men at the top, grandfather, father, son, women next, grandmothers, mothers, daughters, children after that, oldest to youngest. It was a system that gave stability to life and provided for an economic transition from one generation to the next. And it kept everything and everyone in place, which included rich and poor, mostly poor. But it also enshrined abuses with godly authority. Men could harm women with impunity, and adults could abuse children without repercussion, and authority could not be questioned, all of which shackled change and transformation to, it's always been done this way. Jesus attacked it. He raised irreverent questions about it. He told anyone who would listen that he had come to crack it open. Now that must have been a popular stand, huh? Imagine running for office on a platform of anti-family values. What Jesus says basically is this: look, those of you who love your parents more than me, in fact, those of you who love your children more than me, well, you've got it all wrong. Those who find their life will lose it. Those who lose their life will find it. And what he's saying is that anything short of placing our primary focus and our core fidelity in something other than God is an act of, well, it's an act of self-centeredness, or as I like to call it, self-orbit. And self-orbit ultimately means that we are being led away from a higher and better power. Now, considering how much we love our children and how many other loyalties we have put between ourselves and this thing we call God, Jesus' rhetoric is a bit bruising, don't you think? So, I just want to apologize for this rough stuff at the very moment that what we really want is some TLC. For us old white people right now, we might prefer some Mary Oliver and Bach and ice cream to Jesus and Jeremiah. But that's not what we have. And while people with privilege like us, we have plenty of our own issues as well. And still, it's no time to whine about them. Let's listen to Jesus and lift our eyes to the horizon, which means away from the self-orbit around our concerns. And then we can move on from it. First of all, Jesus was not brandishing a sword. He happened to be quoting from the prophet Micah. Now, why the lectionary committee did not pair Micah with Jesus today, I have no idea. But listen to this from Micah 7:6, chapter 7, verse 6 in Micah. Put no trust in a friend. Have no confidence in a loved one. Guard the door of your mouth from her who lies in your embrace. For the son treats the father with contempt. The daughter rises up against her mother. The daughter-in-law rises up against her mother-in-law. Your enemies are members of your own household. But as for me, I will look to the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. That's Micah, 700 years before Jesus. So Jesus was clearly referencing Micah. And then in another 2 chapters in Matthew, Jesus is going to bring this home in very personal terms. When told his brother and sisters and mothers had arrived, were outside the door, and wanted to take him away because they thought he was possessed by Beelzebub too. Jesus says, "Who is my mother and my brother and sisters?" And then he answers his own question by saying that his true family are those committed to the same mission as he is committed to. Now, there are any number of ways that we can hear this text from Jesus and Micah, and frankly, lining up like mile markers across the whole millennium, all the prophets. But here's how I hear it right now, in this moment, our moment right now. And that's this. Jesus is the gauntlet. Jesus is the gauntlet. To those of us who have been privileged because of our income, because of our education, that's pretty loud, because of our social milieu, because of our race, because of our ethnicity, because of our gender, because of our sexuality, and yes, because of our nationality, we need to be clear. We need to be clear about our place and our commitment in the mission for the kingdom of God to come on earth as it is in heaven. For the kingdom of God to come on earth as it is in heaven. We need to be steadfast allies, politically, economically, theologically, socially, with those who have been marginalized. At the same time, we have been privileged. Now, that does not mean that we have to give away all we have and reject our own community and our own history, but it does mean giving away what keeps us privileged at the expense of other people being empowered. It does mean recognizing our privilege, understanding it. It does mean doing some homework to understand how the various forms of our privilege have marginalized others. It does mean taking sides. It does mean getting out of our self-orbit. It does mean understanding that the basic loyalty to family is to the human family. It does mean our allegiance to the human family and our commitment to greater equity for those who have been disempowered may actually have to be a source of separation from our own family of origin. Who is my family? Jesus asks. It is those who are with him on a mission to create the kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. The kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. Now, is there any way, any possible way to imagine that God's kingdom on earth has people with as much privilege as many of us have, while at the same time having so much brutality and inequality for so many others? Is there any way God's kingdom on earth looks like that? No, there is no way. There is no way, Jesus declares, to be a partisan of the kingdom of God and remain ignorant, in denial, or belligerent to the reality of racism and privilege and marginalization. No way to be a partisan of the kingdom of God and remain ignorant, in denial, or belligerent. That's the gauntlet Jesus laid down. The entire prophetic hall of fame echoes it across time and history and geography. Now, it doesn't matter that I would rather crawl into bed this morning and shut the whole COVID-19 police brutality, Black Lives Matter world out and go back to sleep. Jesus has laid down the gauntlet. And as has always been true, we have to choose whether we're going to run it or not. Is Jesus my family? Or is it someone else? Is he yours? Thank you for listening.